Hello and welcome to a special episode of Jorgy'S Stripping the Dipping podcast. I am your unusual co-host F1 Blag, and today we have another fantastic engineer to meet you today. So this is Ramitha Edirisinghe. Ramy, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Good. Nice to meet you, Blake.
Fantastic. So the first question I always ask is if you're introducing yourself to someone new, how would you introduce yourself? Who's Ramy?
So I am an engineer at Williams. I work on the cooling system, and I guess ethnicity-wise, I'm of Sri Lankan heritage, and born in the UK and grew up in the US.
Okay. I mean, because I can hear a sort of Atlantic lilt in your
Yeah.
accent. Sort of. When did you move to the US?
We moved in 1990, so I was like 2 years old at the time.
Ah, we're of a similar vintage. Fantastic. Okay. Where did you move to in the US?
Los Angeles.
That's okay. So you moved for the weather, hopefully. I don't know. I presume your parents had some good work out there.
Yeah. My father was in the real estate business, so at that time it was quite hot in Los Angeles.
I can imagine. Yeah. Okay. So, I guess the first question or second question we like to ask, because this is a motorsports podcast, is what are your first motorsports memories? Do you remember anything? I guess you don't remember anything. Okay. So you're in California. What's the first time you really encountered motorsport?
Um, I think the most prominent memory I must have been about, I think, 12 or 13. And like my mother knew I was really into cars, but she didn't really know much about motorsports. And neither did my father really. So they asked one of our friends at school, their father, to take us out to a race event. And so me and his son, we went on a camping trip to the California like desert area. And in the States, like oval racing is really big, and then dirt oval racing is really big. So like they'll do clay pack around like a dirt oval, and then you get these um, methanol powered, like 800 horsepower, like tube frame cars that just go and just drive and slide around the dirt. And as like a 12-year-old, it's like the coolest thing in the world. So that's like my very first memory of motorsports, I guess.
Fantastic. We know a little bit about dirt ovals on this show because we've had Taylor Ferns, who was basically the most successful female racing driver in dirt oval history, and she's
Oh,
in what's
wonderful.
called yeah, exactly. She's in the USAC Silver Crown Series. So it's
Oh,
a
okay. Awesome.
series that's had sort of the Andretti's in it. It's had sort of it's as you say, it's like a staple of American motorsport. That is something perhaps in the UK or Europe we don't have so much. It's fantastic. So, what was your second motorsport memory? How did you evolve from sort of seeing that on that trip? Where did you go next?
Um, Second motorsport. It's probably a while later. When I was in high school, this was around the time when drifting was becoming really big. And the area I grew up in, Southern California, was like it's historically very famous for drag racing and the import drag racing. So like a lot of the Fast and the Furious franchise was filmed in the area that I grew up in, and a lot of those people that were involved in those kind of racing series, they got into drifting from the first days. So when I was in high school, there was this Japanese tuner shop like very close to where I lived, and we would pass by it all the time. And I just remember um, one day, me and my friend just worked up the courage to go there, and they had their drift cars out there. And I think head mechanic, he actually went and showed us all the cars and explained how they all worked. So from that point on, I started just watching that sort of stuff a lot. And so that's probably my second big motorsport experience.
I mean, drifting is something. Yeah, I remember it. It's sort of got like a cult following in the UK. I want to say in the early noughties, and definitely a
Yeah.
Japanese inspiration. There was even a film or a kind of anime about it, and I can't for the life of me remember exactly what it was
Oh,
about. But
Initial
it
D.
definitely got big. Sorry.
It's called Initial D.
Ah, that was it. Initial D. I remember watching like the first series of it, or the first bit where the guy's dad like sells eggs, and he's driving through the
Yeah.
mountains, drifting the car. Like I don't know why I know that memory. Yeah. Did you get into Initial D then?
Oh yeah, I was like me and my friends, like we were just like so crazy about it at the time. Um but that yeah, I think that really got me interested in just cars in general and like building them. And then at the same time, my one of our family friends owned like a German car garage, So during the summers, I would go and help him out here and there. So I learned a bit about like BMWs and Porsches, and like I think the combination of those two really got me interested in cars and racing.
Amazing. And of course, you're basically like currently an aerothermal engineer, and you've kind of graduated with a master's in mechanical engineering, and kind of you have an incredibly impressive CV. So like you got that interest, you were helping out at that German sort of car garage. You went to study. What I find interesting is when you turn, I don't know, a passion into something that you've got to study or work at, for some people it changes, but evidently for you, you've then pushed through and turned it into your career. Did it change at all when you then went to university and started studying it, or is it the same passion since day one?
Um, I think it's the same passion because like I I think for me in motorsports, my interest is first from the engineering side and then second from the sport and driver side. So I think in many ways, motorsports was just an extension of a curiosity of engineering. I mean, in high school, I did robotics and things like that. So when it came time for university, I think I was just in general very excited to learn kind of the science behind like car building and designing structures. So it was quite just a really interesting experience for me in general.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And we just had a guy, Ryan, on the show, the previous episode, who is trying to kind of connect robotics and bring it into the classroom in school as a kind of early years, I don't know, introduction to what you can then do in motorsport later for kids. So, yeah, it sounds like you were kind of an engineering nut from the beginning.
Oh
Um,
yeah, for sure.
Tell our listeners then what an aerothermal engineer is. What does that mean?
Sure. So um, most people, when they think of aerodynamics, they just think of the external body work of the car, the wings, the diffusers. But another really important part in an F1 car is the cooling, because your power unit in general, like it has to operate within a certain temperature range. So there has to be someone that designs all the ducting and the flows that go inside the car. And the challenge with that is that you can't deliver too much cooling to the car, but you also can't deliver too little. And part of the aerothermal job is figuring out how much airflow do we need to direct inside the car to adequately cool it, then designing the cooling system. So also looking at the water system and the gearbox oiling system and figuring out how big do we need to make the exchangers and what the requirements are. And then the other hard part is you also can't make the car too heavy. So you're balancing between your airflow and your water flow needs, um, your weight needs, and then the overall power and reliability requirement. And then the additional thing is that like for the airflow that you use to cool the car, it negatively impacts the aerodynamic performance of the car. And so you have to find that balance because your traditional aerodynamicists don't want to have a lot of your cooling flow interrupt their perfectly designed um, external body work. So it's just a kind of like a multifaceted part where you're partially an aerodynamicist and partially a mechanical engineer.
Like trying to break it down for a mere mortal such as myself.
Okay.
No, no, I mean that made a lot of sense, but does having more cooling, does it create additional drag, or does it just distort the airflow over the car in a way that you wouldn't want? What's the main problem you're trying to avoid or minimize?
Mostly the distortion, because like the cooling air after it exits a radiator, it has a lot of low energy, and that low energy airflow really kind of negatively impacts the car, like where sometimes you want high energy airflow to go to. So that's part of it, and then yes, the drag is also an issue, depending, and it really depends on the circuits. Like certain circuits are very drag sensitive, so that the drag input of the cooling system can be an issue. But I think a lot of times it's more the distortion of the flow field, as you were saying.
Makes sense. And like, I guess my memories of cooling, because I'm sort of an unashamed fan of Lewis Hamilton, my memories of cooling are probably when Mercedes went to maybe Austria and I don't know if it's because it was hot or it's a little bit up in the mountains. It caused them problems, and they perhaps didn't have enough cooling on the car. Presumably, there's a variation across the season. Some tracks, you don't need as much. Others, you do, and you've got to develop a car that kind of hits the right range. Um, Without revealing any trade secrets about Williams, I mean, are there any commonly known tracks where it's harder to cool the car, or where actually you'd have too much cooling?
Yeah, so I think historically, Mexico is like one of the hardest circuits just because of the high altitude. Um, so that's typically a circuit that I think a lot of teams kind of struggle with. And actually, there's kind of a famous older F1 engineer named Willem Toet, and he has a really beautiful article about, I think, the early days of, I think, either when he was working at Benetton or Ferrari, where he realized that this altitude difference would have a huge effect on the cooling performance, and he took that into account when he was designing the cooling the aerodynamic system, and that actually gave them an advantage, and I think actually allowed them to win the race, if I recall correctly. So, but historically, Mexico is like one of the big ones.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. And Mexico kind of had a hiatus on the sort of Formula One calendar. It was there back in the sort of 80s, early 90s, and then came back in the mid teens. So, what happens then if you can't cool the car sufficiently? What's the biggest problem? Is that the engine temperature? Is that then meaning you're gonna have to run? I don't know, not not accelerate the car as hard. I mean, what countermeasures do you have to take if you can't cool the car effectively?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that they'll try to do, and this I guess depends on the power sensitivity of the track. Like if the track's really power sensitive and you need more power, they'll try and just open up the bodywork as much as possible. Even if like you get to the point where your cooling exits aren't big enough, then they might even go as drastic as like cutting additional holes like up to the legality, um, which is something you don't really want to do because that ruins the aerodynamic performance. But then if it's less power sensitive, then yeah, you could ask the driver to change their driving styles in such a way that the demand on the power unit is less.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Or
I can I
yeah,
can I can I can assure you this is not a kind of exam or like a a question. Like I'm fascinated by this. Okay, and we've definitely seen. I'm sure we've seen teams get a knife out or a blade or something and just trim certain things, remove tape, etc. Yeah, it's fascinating. Okay, well, I mean, where do you find yourself working? Obviously, you're based in Oxford. You've got a fantastic job at Williams. So, are you based in the factory? Do you get along to the race weekends at some points, or where do you find yourself based?
so I'm mostly well at the moment 100% factory based. Sometimes I do a little bit of support in the kind of with the aero performance engineers, but I don't really see any trackside role.
Okay, and a really interesting question for you. And I don't want you to have to kind of, I don't know, remember what James Vowell's official lines are on this. But I know that in Formula One at the moment, there's a bit of a debate to do with the cost cap and
Yeah.
capital expenditure, because teams like Williams want to and to come up to the same standard as other teams in terms of their facilities. So Williams, I'm presuming, must have a pretty good wind tunnel from back in the days. I remember Williams in the 90s and so on. Do you find yourself working in the wind tunnel? And are there any sort of other tools that Formula One teams have that help you calculate the cooling? You're using computers to do that. What's the main things you're working on?
Yeah. So wind tunnel is a big part of it, especially when we're working with the external aerodynamicists. Um, then a lot of teams will have cooling specific wind tunnels, just for the radiators, or we'll use like an external testing company that is kind of well versed to do that sort of stuff. Um, and then a lot of teams will use something called like a VTT or virtual test track. You'll see it a lot during before preseason testing. Like I think last year, I think Alpine had released a video of their car on a VTT track, and what it is like this. It's just this facility where you can hook up your car to, and it gives like the same resistances as you would see on track, and you can actually replay old lap data and put the car through its paces before it even goes on track. So a lot of the top F1 teams, before they've even touched the ground for first preseason testing, those cars have already run thousands of kilometers of testing on these virtual tracks facilities.
Wow. And when you say virtual tracks, are they, I mean, because I'm literally a novice when it comes to the engineering side, are they, you've got a real car there and are you, or is it kind of on all computer simulated? Like I can imagine, you know, when they
Oh,
test
right.
the horsepower of cars and they get them on a platform and then it's sort of running the engine. Is it like that or is it sort of virtual completely?
I know it's a real car, so
Yeah. Yeah.
it'll be like the car basically almost ready to go for pre-season testing without all the external bodywork. So it'll be like your chassis, your engine, your gearbox all hooked up, and then you have like huge fans that deliver the airflow for whatever speed that you want, that are connected to your intakes, and your wheels are connected to dyno rollers that you can tune the resistance on. And then you have a computer control that basically can give the throttle profile of what a driver would give for like a different track, I guess, or design criteria that you want.
Fascinating. So it's like you're saying you get the telemetry from, I don't know, driver doing, I don't know, Interlagos or wherever, and a computer is almost replicating the delivery of the throttle and so on and so forth.
Correct. And like because like you're actually now moving the physical engine for those kind of throttle demands, you can actually like see how your cooling system or your gearbox system is responding to like a kind of like a real life scenario. So it gives you an idea of how well your design is, and allows you to kind of react to issues before you even hit winter testing.
Wow, so you're like ahead of the curve. And so like my question, so that was a fascinating insight into the technical side. I'm also interested into like the managerial side. So in organizations, obviously for high performance teams, you often have roles that, as you've described, you've got your sort of external aerodynamicists and you've got your aerothermal engineers, and they've got different jobs that have shared interests, but also competing interests. And the tension, which is not a bad word, you know, you have to get their kind of interest and tension in a way that delivers the best possible performance. So, like, how do you manage that relationship between your team and the kind of external aerodynamicists? Because clearly you want the same thing, you want the car to go quick, but you have different priorities. So, like, how does that relationship work?
Yeah, I think I'm sure it varies from team to team, but like at Williams, most people in general, the culture is kind of like a family culture. Like everyone's like quite supportive and helpful of each other. So especially like with the external aero guys that we work with, we have a very close relationship with them, and so usually like their demands are probably the most important, like as far as like getting the performance. So if they find something that has a lot of performance, like as an aerothermal engineer, like we will work very hard to kind of meet their needs, I guess. But at the same time, if we find like we have a way of looking at the performance metric, and if that performance metric, the effort that's needed to kind of make that happen is not that great, like we'll kind of push back a little bit and say like, hey, I just don't think it's worth it. And there's a little bit of back and forth, but in general, I don't know. It's like it is quite a team sport. So like I think most people they're in the mind space of like whatever makes the car faster is what we're going to do, and most people like they don't have much of an ego about it. Like a lot of people know what the end goal is, just to make a faster car, so everyone's on the same page and willing to work where they can.
I can see that, and I suppose you're right. The performance metric, like ultimately, you can't hide from the stopwatch, as
Yeah.
Toto Wolff, I think, says, and others, as well as other metrics. I mean, what metric is there? Like a kind of physics or kind of a thermodynamic metric that you use to measure the performance of heat loss or reduction in heat? What's the metric do you use?
Yeah, so like there's a couple different ones. I can't talk about all of them, but like
That's fine.
At the end goal, like you said, it's the lap time benefit. So that's like the higher level target, I guess. And then the other big one is something called AMF, so the air mass flow. So like how much airflow do we actually need through the car? So like that's another big target. And then like downforce or drag coefficients. Those are some like the basic ones. And then there are, as you said, like more involved. Like heat transfer related stuff.
I mean, I'm definitely not a journalist, so I'm not going to badger you for, secret answers. We'll do it through love that you'll feel so comfortable that you'll let things slip. So you joined Williams in sort of January 2022. What was it like? Like, was it a kind of competitive application process, or like how did you find yourself at Williams?
Um, that's an interesting question. So Williams was I had applied to a bunch of teams, and actually this was my second interview with Williams. And so what had happened was I had applied for an aeroscience job, um, and on LinkedIn, and like my LinkedIn profile has a lot of thermal experience on it. And when the recruiter saw that, they came back to me and they told me, like, look, you've applied to this aeroscience job, but we actually feel that you're more qualified for this thermal engineering job, which at the time they hadn't even listed. I think they were getting ready to list it. And then, so they asked me if I wanted an interview, and then I took the interview, and then I got the job, I guess. Um, so it was kind of like being at the right place at the right time. Um,
Yeah.
but there were many years leading up to that kind of built to that point, I guess.
No, I can see that on your CV. I mean, the thing that makes me smile now is that one of our previous guests, Sam Leeks, who also I think used to work as a composites technician at Williams a few years back, um, she was talking about the power of LinkedIn. That people sort of recruiters obviously look at that as a key way to sort of spot people that would be extremely suited to the Formula One world. I think she's worked at Alfa Romeo and of course Red Bull. So you prior to that you were in California. Um, so you mentioned that you might not have actually been looking for a Formula One job. So what were you doing in California before you kind of came to sunny Oxfordshire?
Yeah, graduating from my bachelor's, I moved back to California, and I was working at a company called Advanced Clutch Technology, and we were designing kind of like clutches for like drift cars and drag racing cars and a little bit of road racing cars here and there. Um, and while I was doing that, I got involved with this time trial slash time attack team. And at that time, time attack, which is just basically like you can think of it as just like a one lap qualifying event, but like the entire event, I guess, is based on just uh, doing your fastest lap time, and there are very little regulations on the aerodynamic design of the car. So the team I joined, the driver was quite good, but they didn't really have an engineering arm of that team, and so I came in and basically started getting more and more involved with setting up the data systems of the car, and then looking into the aerodynamics of the car. And then I started getting more and more interested in the aerodynamic design of the car. And coming from a mechanical engineering background, like you only take a certain amount of fluid dynamics classes, so you don't necessarily have the entire background that a traditional aerodynamicist does if they do like an aerospace engineering degree. So at the time, I started realizing that I was kind of hitting the limit of what I knew and what I could read in books. So I went in, and while I was working, I did kind of like a part-time master's over many years. And from that, that master's had like kind of like a thermal fluids degree, but it allowed you to use the university wind tunnel and kind of get experience in aerodynamic testing like that. So between the grad school and then my full-time job and then working at Jaeger Racing, I was kind of developing like my aerodynamics background. Um, and then after finishing my master's degree, I decided to kind of look into doing more professional like aerodynamicist role rather than just kind of like an amateur team.
And the rest, as they say, is history. Um,
Yeah.
so, I mean, that time attack thing, yeah, I'm kind of imagining like Gran Turismo, like sometimes it's like on a hill climb or something. But like, um, you mentioned that the kind of rules and regulations are not as well, they're not going to be as stringent as Formula One, where the specification is extremely tight. So, did you find yourself in your time at Jaeger Racing, like coming up with potentially innovative approaches, or did the cars all look quite similar by the end? Like, what were your fondest memories as the sort of aerodynamics guy there at the Jaeger Racing?
Um, I guess there are two fond memories. One was um, there's this one track in Southern California that's quite famous called Willow Springs. It's a nowadays it's kind of an outdated track, but in the 1950s and 60s, it was probably one of the most important tracks for sports car racing. And in this track, there's like a sequence of turns. I think it's turn 9, 10, where um, in theory you can take it flat out if you're very committed and you have a car that has enough aerodynamic downforce. But at the time when we were driving there, like in our series, not many people could take that turn flat out. They would kind of always have to lift. And I remember in 2016 we were having just this really great year, and we had just I had just developed my first under tray package for this car, and we were looking at the data, and we had gone to this track I think 3 or 4 times, and after analyzing the data, we were seeing that we were dropping lap times more and more and more there, but we realized that Mark at the time was still lifting in this sequence of turns 9, 9, and 10. And I was talking with Mark, and I remember the night when Mark looks at me and he's like, I think I can take this flat out. And to give an idea of this track, like if you make a mistake, this track is located in the desert, so you would fly off the track and go straight into like desert sand and crash the car. So you had to be quite committed on this track to do that. And I remember being at that event, and we see him going out on this flyer lap, and like my heart's like really pounding, and I see him going like past turn 8 now into 9, and then he just nails it, hits the throttle full committed, and he's going into this turn I think like 150 or 140 miles an hour, and does not lift, and he just makes it through the turn, and I couldn't believe it. It was just the car just had so much grip, and he comes in and finishes that flyer lap and breaks the record for all-wheel drive, and we were just that was just like one of the greatest memories. I think just felt so good, and yeah, that was one. And then there was another one where we we were racing an event called Speed Ring, where it's located on the Auto Club Fontana track, so it's part NASCAR oval and part infill road course. And on these oval courses, because of the banking, you can really get some like strong speeds, and because of that, your aerodynamics package works even more. And I remember Mark was doing his flyer on this Roval course, and he came into the pits and he told me, he's like, Ramy, I wish you could drive this car because I can literally feel the car being sucked down to the ground. This is like the most amazing thing. And that felt so good to me as an engineer, like just because, like as an engineer, like I don't drive the car. So I don't get any like validation of how good it is until like, you see the driver just like so happy and so elated, and it just feels so great.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm while you're talking, I'm looking at the tracks. I mean, I was looking at the Willow Springs. I love some of the names of the corners here. You've got Rabbit's Ear. What else you got? Budweiser Balcony. Hopefully, I'm on the right track, but it looks
Yeah, it's probably Big Willow. Yeah.
Big Willow, right? Exactly, yeah, because there's a load of different configurations. Yeah, and you're right. Like, if you're listening to the podcast at the moment, just Google Willow Springs Raceway. There's a picture of it from the air. It's basically in the middle of the desert with a bit of a mountain behind it. You definitely don't want to crash there. I mean, fantastic. Kudos. Great work. And talking of deserts, so you kind of found yourself successful with your interview and moved to Williams. Like something I'm also fascinated about as having lived abroad, moving from the US to the UK, and obviously you were born in the UK, but probably don't have like many memories of it. Have you found the cultural differences or the kind of difference in sort of how you live between here and there? What are the main things that come to mind?
Um, I guess the first one that stuck out is like naturally everything in the UK is a bit smaller, so your rooms are smaller, your restrooms are smaller, and that took a little bit of getting used to coming from California, where the houses are much larger. Um, and I think cultural wise, especially like even working practice wise, I think British engineering culture is a little bit more understated. So sometimes it's hard to understand if you're doing a good job or a bad job, or if you've really made a mistake. Whereas in the US, I feel like we tend to be a little bit more overstated or extroverted. So it comes off across easier. So I think that was a little bit of a harder transition.
Yeah.
Um,
And on that point, I definitely find when I'm working with colleagues, some people do need a bit more sort of expressive feedback, because if you don't tell them they've done a great job, they might assume like you hate them or something. And equally, like British people don't really express like with pure anger when they're upset. There's a Twitter page called Very British Problems, which had something today. I don't know if have you seen that Very
I
British
guess
Problems?
I've seen some of their posts.
Yeah, so today, like it said, things that British people say when they're absolutely furious, and and basically it just says like, "What do you think you're doing?" And if you or "Can I help?" Or "Now look," things that like actually as a Brit, when I'm saying these, I'm like like panicking, but like they're not exactly direct in explaining our sort of dismay. So like as an engineer, when you're I don't know pitching an idea, or when someone's giving you feedback on something you've done, presumably you're having to kind of turn on your radar even higher to sense whether they're happy or not. I don't know. Is that right?
Uh, yeah, that's correct. I definitely got the "Can I help?" A bit. So like where I was starting out. So definitely that took a while to like understand what was going on.
Weird. We speak the same language, we watch the same Netflix, and yet for whatever reason, there's so many hidden differences. Not least the weather, sadly for you now living in the UK. Although this year, this summer's better than last. I think I'm trying to remember.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
definitely. I think so.
So talking of sort of the seasons and going from last year, when you had your drivers were Nicholas Latifi and Albon had come back. Is that right? I'm trying to remember when Albon came back. Was it last year? He's doing such a good job. And then this year, you've sort of switched to Logan Sargent. And of course, the big change is that James Vowles is your team principal. When these personalities at the top of the team sort of change, be it the driver, the team principal, do you notice a shift in the kind of atmosphere in the team or the culture? You talked about the culture earlier.
Yeah, I think so. Like in the sense that like I think one of the hardest things about F1 is that everyone in every team works very, very hard. Like even the 10th place team, the engineers are putting in very long hours to make a car work well. And when you're winning championships, like that hard work that you put in is instantly rewarded. So you feel good about what you're doing. But when you're at the bottom of the championship, like you just think like, I've put in so many hours into this car. I've broken sleep to make this work, and my car is finishing last place. It can be quite an emotionally detrimental thing for, the factory staff. So I think this is where the drivers and like the team principals have a huge role in kind of motivating the factory or bringing up that kind of um, atmosphere. Like I think sometimes you'll hear James Vowles talk about it, like where the heads are lifted up high this season, and it's a true thing. Like the more the better your cars do, or like when we see Albon like finishing at such high places or qualifying at such high places, it really it feels so good because you know how much hard work you put into it, and like finally we can see some benefit from this result. So I think the team principal and even to like a seasoned driver to a certain extent really does play a big effect in just like boosting the overall morale of the team. Like I think in general, if you're an F1 engineer, you're already a highly motivated person, but it can get to you sometimes if you see your car consistently finishing last, or like just like anyone, if you're on social media and you see that your team is like just the butt of all jokes or of a meme, like it does feel like it hurts, right? Because you put in so much of your blood, your sweat into this, and like just to think like, wow, it's not even worth it at some time. So I think that's where I think like someone like James Vowles, I personally find like very inspirational, and it really does like pick up your motivation again after setbacks.
You definitely get that sense with James Vowles, that he's a kind of very thoughtful leader. Like I've seen him appear more on sort of the world feed or on sort of Sky Sports F1 during the broadcast. The things that he says about the performance of the team publicly, he does his YouTube videos or kind of debriefs and Q&As. I mean, obviously, this is only me seeing what he's projecting outside of the organization, but it definitely feels like he's being sort of transparent and motivating. And, obviously, it's still quite a few races to go, but Williams in P7 in the championship at the moment, which would be, I think, your best result for quite a while, certainly towards the beginning of the turbo hybrid era. So fingers crossed that continues. I guess a question on that front, do you have colleagues that have been in Williams for like ages and ages? Because back when I was a kid, Williams was sort of like Alan Prost, Nigel Mansell, Ayrton Senna, Damon Hill, and Jacques Villeneuve, like champion. Like, do you have people that are there from that era, or is engineering quite a young game?
Definitely. So I think the average age of someone at Williams is probably in the 30s or 40s. But last year when I first joined, there was one guy who had recently retired when I was there, and he had been at Williams since 1980. And so he had been around for a majority of all the world championships that we had had, except for I think one or two. So there are a couple like old timers still at Williams. I think a lot of them have started to retire now, but definitely there's still one or two still left.
You'd almost want to have like, I don't know, a fortnightly half an hour story time kind of meeting where that guy just I don't know, recounts those days. It's something about the identity of the organization. Like Williams is a big name in Formula One, and I don't know, like, your parents did they kind of get the scale or the kind of reputation of Williams, and how did they react when you got the job?
Um, so I think my mother didn't really fully understand, but like my father passed away a while back, but when he was still around, I remember he found out that I was watching Formula One, and he told me, he's like, when I was in England in the mid 80s before you were born, like we used to go to Silverstone and like camp out on the side, and we would watch the cars, and he would name like the Williams drivers. So he talked about like Nigel Mansell and Prost. I mean, this is I guess closer to the 90s, but yeah, he definitely knew of Williams, and so I'm sure if he had been around when I had joined Williams, he would have been quite excited.
I'm sorry to hear about your dad's passing, and like I'm sure he would be extremely proud. I mean, working for Williams is sort of like, I don't know, working for the BBC or working, like a huge household name, certainly in this sport, with a fantastic and glorious history, and hopefully you guys are bringing the sport back. Before I switch to a sort of car restoration project you're going to, before I do that, like you talked about like the challenges of seeing, or the ease of seeing your results on the track. If you're a front running team, if you're an engineering that team, you're like, yes, look, I helped produce that rear wing, and now look, we're winning the championship. Williams is sort of, it feels like it's on the way back, because maybe it was 5 years ago or so, they had quite a tricky winter, and they didn't make the first round of testing. Do you get the sense within the organization that it feels like it's on the rebound? Do you think there's still kind of a bit of muscle memory or still some hurt from that experience a few years ago, and the determination to bring Williams back?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that we're on the rebound. Like, I've thankfully been able to be part of a couple teams that have kind of gone through this rebirth process, and I feel like the culture is always the same, where like you at the beginning you feel you can sense like there's a little bit of cynicism and negativity just because of years of like downward spirals and hurt. But then you do see slight changes of like, oh wow, yeah, we're actually doing better. And then um, you start seeing people like come up with new ideas or like more open to trying new things that maybe they weren't before. And like maybe I've been fortunate to be at Williams at kind of a better time when we're starting to make this transition. But I definitely see it, at least if I compare it to my past experiences, I definitely see a certain change of outlook. And it's still early days, but I do think that there is a change happening within Williams. And a lot of people who work at Williams, like the heritage and the history is a big part of why they work there. So I think there is an excitement of the idea of like, wow, we could try and bring Williams back to the glory days. I think there is that excitement that is starting to build again.
Fantastic. And yeah, that does sound like a really motivating vision to be driving towards. And talking of kind of bringing things back to their glory days, I hear you're restoring a BMW. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Fantastic. You see, how did I know that? No, it's my co-host Dens who does fantastic research. But yeah, so like, what sort of a BMW is it, and what made you pick that car?
Yeah, so it's a 1975 BMW 2002, and the reason why I had this car is, again, my family friend, his father had this BMW garage in Los Angeles, and as a kid, when I was a kid, he owned a BMW 2002 as well, and so he used to take me for rides in it, and as a child, that's like one of my first memories of a cool car. And when I was a teenager, I had saved up all this money from working, and I was looking to buy my first car. And it so happened that he had had a customer who had brought in this 2002 for repair work, and then they just vanished. So he ended up getting the car on a lien sale, and he was trying to get rid of it. And I basically asked him, I was like, hey, you have this car. I'm looking for a car. Would you sell it to me? And so from that, that's how I ended up with that car.
And so, what does the car need doing? Like, does it drive now, or does it need a kind of
Oh
complete
no,
rebuild?
it has been driven since 2006.
Okay,
So
fair enough.
what I've done is I've taken out all the original 70s engine and transmission, and I'm putting in a newer Honda engine and a newer transmission from an 80s BMW into the car. So like the Honda engine, which might sound kind of strange of a choice, but it weighs about the same as the original 70s engine and makes double the power stock. So that's kind of one of my main motivations to using it.
Okay. And that's interesting. You mentioned the weight. So, does the car need a certain amount of weight for balance, or was it just it was the maximum weight the chassis could hold, and so that was your limit?
No, definitely for balance. Like I do believe in the kind of the Colin Chapman idea of like a lighter car wins everywhere. So like certain people have said, oh, why don't you put a V8 into it, especially being in America? And like I've definitely done stuff like that in previous projects on other cars, but I felt for this car, it should have a four-cylinder engine and it should be lightweight. Just because the car was such a small car, it would be kind of awkward for it to have a lot of power, but just be a very heavy car. It doesn't really make much sense.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm just looking at pictures of it here, and I would encourage listeners to do the same. So, like, does it have? Is it a rear engine? Like, where's the engine on a, or is it the front? I don't know. Where is the engine on a
Yeah,
BMW?
it's a front engine rear wheel drive.
Ah,
Um,
there we go.
racing.
Okay, fantastic. So what's the like? I don't want to pin you down here because you're like a busy guy. You did your masters whilst doing the kind of time attacks, whilst doing your day job, and now you're in a Formula One team working extremely hard. But like, do you have a time horizon by which you hope to have restored the car, or is that just too difficult to say?
Um, I guess my hope is like within the next like 5 or 6 years, but realistically, like I don't know because like this car is definitely like when I have time. And at the moment, it stays in the United States, so I rarely get to see it as well. So it's definitely not like a short term project.
It sounds like a member of the family, sort of living in the US at the moment. Okay, well, you're going
Yeah,
to rather soon.
I think like my mom and my sisters just are like this are just so amazed. I still have it, just all the grief that's given me. So.
Well, when we hear that you've taken a job in IndyCar or I don't know some other US based sport, we'll know why you wanted to move back with to the car. So that's fantastic. Okay, well, look. At this point, we normally play a game called Taxi, Dinner, Avoid, and I'm kind of like struggling, debating whether to play it with you because I don't want you to kind of say something about a driver that suddenly then becomes a Williams driver next season. Who knows? But basically, the game is there's 20 drivers on the grid. You have to pick a driver that's really fast, that's going to take you to the dinner, smooth but fast. You've got a driver that's fascinating, so you want to have dinner with them, and then you've got a driver that you might want to avoid. Let's put it that way. So I don't know. Maybe we don't have to go on the Formula One grid, but does that sound like a game you want to play? We could play another.
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I mean, I'll open it up. It doesn't have to just be this grid. Everyone finds the first two answers much easier than the third. So, who's going to be your taxi driver taking you to dinner?
Taxi driver. It's hard because this is probably the same person that I would want to have dinner with, but I'll say taxi driver. I'll say Lewis Hamilton.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, and that's just sort of the speed. He doesn't have many DNFs, so I guess you'd get to dinner on time and no problem.
Yeah, and just consistency, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. There are some other drivers who we won't mention who perhaps you'd have a 50-50 chance of getting to dinner. Okay, so who would you have dinner with? Obviously, you've mentioned Lewis, so I'm going to say, unfortunately, even though he is an interesting guy, you can't select the same guy. So who are you going to have dinner with?
Dinner. I don't know why, but the first name that's coming to my head is Valtteri Bottas.
Nice.
I think he seems like he doesn't talk a lot, but I think he just seems like an interesting person.
And I feel like he's having a lot more fun these days. He's sort of growing his mustache out. He's having his cereal. He's got, he loves a bit of espresso coffee as I do as well. Okay, yeah, I'm sure he'd be an interesting guy. Okay, so and also I suppose he's a Williams alumni and was there when you last got third in the championship. So I hope there's a picture of Bottas somewhere at Grove factory. Who knows? Maybe there is.
Oh yeah, there definitely is.
Good. Okay, so and he was a bit younger in those days. So okay, this is the tricky one. Which driver would you avoid?
So this might be a kind of controversial one, but yeah, probably Max Verstappen.
Okay. I mean, I don't. You don't need to elaborate on that, but I know that a certain proportion of our listener base will completely understand where you're coming from. But there we are. Maybe next season Max Verstappen's going to come to Williams, and that's going to be awkward. That's going to be extremely awkward.
I think he's a good driver. It's just like I don't think he'd be someone I'd want to hang out with.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I get that impression. I mean, maybe he'd want to hang out with you, but I don't think he'd want to hang out with me. I don't know as well. So there we are. Brilliant. Okay. I mean, he likes his sim racing. Do you find yourself doing any of that, or are you far too busy, far too cool to do that?
I haven't done much of it. Like at Williams, we have like the esports sims that I've tried once or twice. And I have a couple friends who are really into it, but as of yet, I haven't really put a big effort into it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where you have to get into it. Like Dens, who's the other co-host on the show, he's got like every time I look, he's got a new element in his rig. He's got like this screen that is sort of curved. I mean, I'm saying all the wrong nouns, like all the wrong words, but it's extremely impressive. The chair, the wheels, the force feedback on the pedals, like it takes a lot of time as well. I feel like my wife would just sort of divorce me or something. I don't know. Like my kids would wonder where I am, but there we are. Okay. I mean, actually, yeah, a quick question before we kind of ask your advice for kind of the next generation of engineers, but like, what do you have much spare time, working for a Formula One team, and what do you find yourself doing?
It varies depending on where in the season we are. If we're in the kind of the more design phase of the season, or if we're more on the kind of like trackside analysis phase of it. But I have an okay amount of time. I'd say like probably not as much as a normal job, but I definitely have enough time to kind of like on weekends, especially like sometimes there'll be enough time to I like outside of motorsport stuff. I like hiking and camping. So like I haven't done any camping in the UK yet, but I've definitely gone on like long walks and hiking here and there. And then also on the side, I kind of I'm very big into like the maker movement. So just woodworking or just metalwork and just making things for the joy of it. So I've tried to kind of work on stuff like that.
Well, I learn something new every day. I'm just like looking up the maker movement or maker culture. So basically, like you're extremely good with your hands, and like if you know if you have kids in the future, I presume you don't have them now. If they want you to make like one of those soapbox derby races, you could just do that in the blink of an eye, presumably.
I don't know about Blake of an eye, but like definitely, I could at least attempt it. So
Right, right, right. Okay, I feel like we need to end this conversation at this point. Otherwise, I'm going to start commissioning you to build one for an 8-year-old and one for a 5-year-old. So I know you don't have the time. And yeah, and hiking, like you're not far from the Cotswolds there. It's like, provided you get some good weather, it's like a lovely part of England. So definitely, definitely worth a look.
definitely.
Okay, so we're at that point. We love to talk to people from all over motorsport. We've had actually quite a few engineers on, but we've had people from the media, drivers. You know, we've had Mario Andretti, we had Brian Herter earlier this year as well. And we always ask them sort of, you followed a particular path. This is something you're really passionate about, and you've ended up, at the pinnacle of motorsport, right? You're in Formula One. So, what advice would you give to younger people that perhaps have that similar passion? About engineering or motorsport, like how do like what advice would you give them in today's world to get into where you've got to or where they want to get to?
Um, I think one of the big things is that there's no one path into getting into more sport. Like my journey is quite different from someone else's, but the main thing is that to always kind of, as long as you have that passion, to keep on going. Like you're going to hear a lot of no's, you're going to get a lot of rejections, and at times you're going to feel like you doubt your own abilities. But if you have like kind of the love of more sport, and you still really had that fire burning, like don't give up, just keep on going, and eventually it will happen for you. Like I'm really a big believer that like you kind of make your own luck, in the sense that yes, there is the element of luck, but the more you try, you will get luckier.
Absolutely. And like a question for you on this, because talking about rejection and also self-improvement, I presume there's a sort of balance between, you know, you don't want to take things to heart in a way that demoralizes you, but you have to take on board or try and reflect on why you aren't in a particular moment as successful as you'd like to be. Like, have you found yourself walking that tightrope of like, maybe sometimes it's really demoralizing, other times it's really inspiring? Like, do you have a reflection on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think like probably one of the biggest reflection moments for me was early on when I was with Jaeger Racing. I felt I was ready to kind of take a more sports aerodynamics job, and I had an interview with a NASCAR team for an aerodynamics position, and it was probably one of the worst interviews I ever had, and it was just quite like I just remember the interviewer just really grilling me on basic aerodynamics questions, and I was like really struggling, and I remember just getting out of that interview just like really demoralized. But then I think after reflecting for a day or two, I realized, you know, now I know the questions that he was asking. These are things I need to learn, and so that kind of spurred even actually the want to go to grad school to kind of learn more. So I definitely had those moments.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting you mentioned aerodynamics in NASCAR because Den's, my co-host, has just been sort of doing at NASCAR on iRacing, and his joke, and don't take this offensively because you're sort of an adopted American, is that like they're basically bricks, but presumably there's actually much more going on aerodynamically than that disparaging remark, which I don't associate myself would lead you to believe. Like, is there a lot of aero going on in NASCAR?
Definitely. Like, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I do know that most teams have full CFD and wind tunnel programs, and they're constantly in the wind tunnel, improving the cars. I'd argue that in US, like top tier motorsport, probably NASCAR has the best opportunities for an aerodynamicist right now. Just because like IndyCar right now, a lot of it's specs, so like there are changes you can do, but I think NASCAR probably gives you a little bit more flexibility.
Okay, yeah, I did think that when I suggested you kind of are going to go back and, I don't know, base yourself in California, that actually, yeah, maybe NASCAR is the one. So NASCAR isn't spec, even though, like, to my untrained British eyes, they all look the same. I can't believe I said that,
I
but you know.
Yeah, so I don't know the full rule set. I think they are spec, but I think there's a little wiggle room on how you can set up the cars. And I think for oval racing, I think the stability is quite a important thing from my understanding. I this is where I'm kind of talking out of my depth a little bit, just because I don't. I think the oval racing is a little bit more kind of its own unique demands. But from what I've seen on job adverts and just what I've read, I think NASCAR does have a lot of aero development. I mean, going on, maybe not to the same way that you would do in a Formula One car or an Indy car, but I think there is a lot of work on trying to get the cars more stable, or looking at passing and drafting.
Yeah, I can imagine. Gosh, well, yeah, there's a whole nother sort of episode there in terms of aero, actual sort of what you do in aero, sort of external aero, I guess, in motorsport. But perhaps we'll leave that for another time. Before we go to our pinnacle of questions, which I know is one of the most serious ones our listeners are waiting for me to ask it to you. Before we do that, like, can people follow you on social media? Do you post much about sort of your work or motorsport? Or like, where can we find you?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I go by F1 Ramy. Um, that I post a little bit here and there about life at Williams, but nothing like you're not going to get anything like technical from my page, and then a lot of my car restoration stuff. Um, and then on LinkedIn, if you just look for Ramitha Edirisinghe, I'm usually happy to connect where I can. So
We'll definitely we'll look you up, F1 Ramy. I could see you on Insta. Yeah, fantastic. Well, yeah, please go and give Ramy a follow on Insta, give him a follow on Twitter there, and yeah, please, if you're listening and you're this deep into the episode, we're just hitting the hour mark. Please follow us at Stripping the Dipping, or at Strip the Dip, I should say, on all social media. Wherever you're listening to us, be that on YouTube or on your favorite podcast provider of choice, please give us a like or a comment or even a 5-star rating if that is your volition. In fact, and Georgie will tell me off for saying this, give us a 1-star rating if that's what you want to do. But at least it's a rating. You know, no, all publicity is good publicity. I'm about to get fired from the show. So the final question, the question of truth. I'll set it up by asking, like, Ramy, I've not met anyone that doesn't like pizza, but I just, in case you don't, do you like pizza, the occasional pizza?
oh, definitely.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, right. Well, you just catches people off guard, right? So this is the polemic. The question is yes or no answer. Pineapple on pizza.
This question. Uh, so I am definitely on the pineapple on pizza camp. So
Oh.
I feel sorry for my friends who disagree, but I'm sure the Italians in my team right now are like would be quite offended by that question. I mean that answer, but yeah, I guess coming from California, I've been used to it. So
I mean, you just trash talked a whole sort of 50% of the population by saying you felt sorry for us, you know? I have a great life. I enjoy my life. I eat pineapple on its own or in a pina colada. Like, it's fine, you know? It's fine. Okay.
uh,
Right. We'll get you back. I don't know how, but we'll get you pineapple on pizza lovers back. And I know that Georgie is laughing somewhere in the background at 2 a.m. in Sri Lanka as we record this. But there we are. Fantastic. Well, look, I think that brings us to a close. I mean, is there anything else you want to add before we conclude the show?
just to say thank you for taking the time to interview me, and I really enjoyed the experience.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, like, no problem. It's always great fun. I'm always sort of awestruck by people that follow their passion, first of all. But second of all, when they follow it and they're actually getting to do fantastic things, not least in F1. So we wish you every success, even if you choose to go back to the US and look after your 1975 BMW 2002. Maybe he or she needs a name. I don't know. Maybe has it got a name or not yet?
So the nickname is Sophia.
Sophia.
And
okay.
Yeah. No clue why I named it that, but in high school I gave it that name, so it just stuck with it.
I can see that. I can see that. Like, okay, well, we won't have a competition to name your BMW, but that's a great little name. Okay, well, look, this has been your co-host, F1 Blag. Another episode of season 2, Jorgy'S Stripping the Dipping in the books. What a fantastic time we've had. I'd encourage everyone to check out our previous episode with Ryan Yates. Check out our clips on YouTube. But until next time, I'll see you soon. Goodbye.